thank you very much for all you folks who came out on a very hot night. I did not know that A, there was a library concert across the street tonight, or that B, there was a Red Sox Yankee game on. Or this might have been on a different night, but we are here. Let me tell you just briefly why we're here, like you don't already know. But what we wanted to do, and thanks to the group Invest in Norton for sponsoring it. They're sponsoring this in name only. They made the space available, came up with the idea, and invited me to participate, and I'm very grateful for that. But what we're here for tonight is simply to try and explain, as best you can in a very brief amount of time, town government and town meeting. Now, anybody who thinks that they're going to leave here totally understanding town government and town meeting, you're going to be very disappointed, because I've been doing it for over 40 years and I don't understand it, so, God bless you in trying to figure it out. But what we're going to do tonight is try to go over it. I'm going to go over the basic framework of town government, and then try to concentrate on town meeting and how town meeting does the budgets and things like that. Try to make it useful so that if you've already shown interest by coming here. And as I look around, there's people who I don't know, and then there's people who could probably teach this, this thing, give this seminar instead of me. So we've got a good mix of people. But the reason that we wanted to do this was so that when you come to town meeting, you understand. There's nothing worse than going to town meeting or trying to work within your government, and you just don't know. You have no idea, because, and it's one of my pet peeves. In school, not just in Norton, but in all schools, they teach you, in my day, and now do I sound old, it was civics. And you learn about, the three houses of government. You learned about the federal government. You learned about the judicial branch and the executive branch and the legislative branch. And you learned about what the terms of the senators and the president was. And you learned all these things, and that's great. And in a few months, probably 50-60% of Norton registered voters will go to the polls and do their duty and vote for, one way or another for president. And that's a tremendous thing, and that's wonderful. And yet, when it comes to local elections, we get 3%, 5%, 6%, 10% turnout. And people say, well, it's much more important that you have, your national government. That's President of the United States versus selectmen for the town of Norton or town meeting. How is that big? Well, let me just tell you briefly how it's big. You may worry about a lot of things, but if you suddenly don't pay attention to your town government, and now you wake up one day and the lot across the street from you has been sold to somebody who wants to build an asphalt plant, and you go, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to find information about this? How am I going to stop this? I'll tell you what, try calling the White House and asking the president. You won't get very far. You won't get much information. And suddenly you're going to realize that you need to talk to your planning board members. You need to talk to your board of health. You need to talk to your selectmen. You need to talk to your assessors. You need to talk to all these people that you didn't even really know existed. You don't know where they are. You don't know who they are. You don't know anything about them. But suddenly these are the most important people in your life, because they're the ones who are going to pass the zoning laws. They're the ones who are going to make decisions that are going to affect you, and you're suddenly going to have an asphalt plant across the street if things don't go the way that you want them. And now all of a sudden we're running around and we're trying to do it, but because we don't teach these kind of things, people don't know where to go. And I'm constantly amazed, because local government affects our lives much more directly than the national government does. It really does. On a daily basis, it affects us much more directly. And if you don't think so, if your taxes go up, and you're withholding, and it goes up, $5 a week, and suddenly, they're taking $250 a year more out of your pay, everybody goes, I hate that, it's really awful, they're wasting the money, but what am I going to do? But you raise the property tax by $250 in a year, oh my God. It's like the end of the world, everything's stopping, there's going to be people eating cat food on the side of the road, life just stops. And that's because we can control one of those things, and we can't control the other. And that's the difference between local government and the federal or state government. It's much more direct. Your selectmen, one of whom is here tonight, Mr. Bramwell, they live in town. They'll answer their phone. You can find them. They can't hide from you. If something's really important, you can go to them and they'll be happy to talk to you. And even if they're not, they'll tell you that they're happy to talk to you. but they will talk to you and they will help you. And they are accessible. You don't have to wait 6 weeks for an appointment. They will help you. That's why local government is such a wonderful tool. And yet, it gets mocked. It gets ignored. And that's a shame, because it's very, very important. And people don't realize it until they need it. And I've been doing this a long time. I'm not under any illusion that suddenly people are going to awake one day and say, oh my God, local government, we're going to have 100% turnout at all local elections, and town meeting, we're going to have 4,000 people. God forbid we should have 4,000 people. But the whole point is we need to pay attention to government. And since it's not taught in our schools, since it's really not made aware, people need to know. Kids need to know because they grow up, and some do stay in town. I've been here a long time. My kids grew up here. My grandson is now in the 3rd grade in the school system. So believe it or not, some people do stay. And it becomes important. So what I'm going to do is this outline that says outline for town government. I'm going to try to go through that quickly. The most important part of tonight will be answering questions. And if you have a question at any time, please feel free to ask, because that's what I want to do more than anything else. But I'm going to go through this quickly only because I want you to at least understand the basic framework. And I'm going to act like you all don't know anything, okay? Just because it's easier. You know, it's easier for me. I'm just going to assume you don't know anything. And so if I'm talking to you like, you know, like you're a 3-year-old, it's only because my wife does that to me all the time, and that's what I hear, so that's what I'm used to. Okay, so let's start out by talking about the branches of government. I call it, the executive branch I split into 2 parts. Executive branch 1, and this is Norton, okay, because every town is different. You can have 2 towns that both have open town meeting forms of government, and yet they can be totally different in how they operate and what they do. So we're talking specifically here for Norton. The executive branch is split into 2 in my mind. One is the town manager. Probably about 20, 30 years ago, Norton went to what we call a strong town manager form of government. And what that is we have a town manager that is heavily invested and charged with running the day-to-day operations of the town. Okay? In some towns, a town manager or a town administrator doesn't appoint the police chief, or doesn't appoint the fire chief, or doesn't appoint key people. Ours does. Okay? We used to have the Board of Selectmen that appointed all these people. I was one of them. I was a selectman back when we appointed the police chief or the fire chief or all these people. Now it's done in a professional manner. They're hired by a professional town manager who's hired by the Board of Selectmen. Town manager is in charge of the day-to-day operations. Town manager, and I'll say he for the purpose of, because right now our town manager is a he, so please don't anybody get mad if I'm not saying, he or she. But the town manager negotiates all contracts except for the school department and the school contracts. The town manager is the chief, basically, financial officer for the town. He's the chief budget officer for the town. The town manager is technically hired by the Board of Selectmen, but not really. If our town manager decided to retire tomorrow, the process that you go through to hire a town manager is our bylaws and our charter spell out that there's a search committee. And that search committee consists of one person from, I think it's 5 different boards. I think it's the assessors, the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and I'm missing one. I don't know who I'm missing, but there's another one. And they appoint 1 member each to make 5, and then the town moderator, who happens to be me right now, appoints the last 4 people. And the bylaw specifically says that the moderator's appointments will be done at the end, so that the moderator is charged with trying to balance the committee. So in other words, if the 5 people all happen to be men, or all happen to be women, or all happen to live in one neighborhood, or whatever, the moderator is charged with trying to balance that. Only one of the moderator's appointments can be a current town official. The other 3 must not hold any elected or appointed office. Once that committee is there, they have a certain amount of time. They actually advertise the position, and they get candidates, and they do the interviews. The search committee does the interviews, and the search committee narrows it down to the final, I think they have to give between 3 and 5 people. They send 3 or 5 people to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen then interview those 3 or 5 people, and the Board of Selectmen hires the final one. The Board of Selectmen cannot hire a town manager that is not one of those finalists. If they don't like any of the finalists that get sent, then they reject them all, and the search committee starts over, and they do it again. But the Board of Selectmen can't just go out on their own and hire a town manager. It's the people who wrote the charter wrote it so that a search committee and the people would still have a voice, but the selectmen would have the final say. And the town manager can be fired by the selectmen. It takes 4 out of the 5 selectmen to vote to fire them, and there's a legal process and a whole thing spelled out in the charter that I won't bore you with now. Probably the most important thing the town manager does is the town manager is the chief budget officer for the town. The budget that goes to town meeting every year is the budget put together by the town manager, not the Board of Selectmen, not the school committee, it's the budget as suggested by the town manager and then as recommended by the finance committee. The finance committee, we'll get into them later, but they play a huge role in the budget process, even though they don't have any absolute power. The town manager is also the chief personnel officer. He's the chief purchasing officer. The town manager basically runs the town on a day-to-day basis. He's in charge of anything, any individual problems. Whatever you have, you go to the town manager. That's the first stop along the way. The other half of the executive branch is the...
Bill, I just have
Yes,
a quick
sure.
question. How long has our current town manager been our town manager?
How long, Brad? Maybe about 3-4 years?
2012.
5 years?
It was 2012, to be wrong.
Pardon me?
2012, I think.
2012? It could, yeah, that sounds about right. It's probably 4 or 5 years. And the average, in Massachusetts, the average term for a town manager is probably about 5 years. That's the average lifespan. Some go 30. Some are lucky to make 1. I think in Norton's town history, we've probably only had, now we've only had town managers since the 80s, Brad, maybe? The late 80s, I think?
It was the 80s, because I've been on every research.
Yeah. So, I mean, so since then, in about 30 years, we've probably had 4 or 5 town managers. And we've been fortunate. We've had some good ones. The other part of the executive branch is the Board of Selectmen on one side and the school committee on the other. They are the elected bodies. They're elected directly by the people. They're each 5-member boards. They are the policy-setting boards. They are the ones who they're specifically forbidden by town charter from getting involved in the day-to-day operation of the town. That's left sort of to the school superintendent on the school side and the town manager on the quote-unquote town side. But the selectmen and the school committee are very important because they set policy. On the school committee, they decide issues of curriculum. They decide the policies and then the superintendent carries it out. It's the same with the Board of Selectmen. They issue licenses, they do a lot of important things, and they set the policy that the town manager is then expected to carry out. They can't tell the town manager who to hire, but by the same token, the town manager can't tell them what policy to hold or how to do things. So it's a little bit of check and balance. And I will tell you, I started on the Norton Finance Committee back in 1974, so I've been around in the days when we had no town manager and when the budgets were all the department heads presented in one place, and FinCom members walked around with binders that literally, no word of a lie, were this thick. And trying to go through a budget with no professional guidance was an absolute nightmare. And people wonder, maybe did we spend unwisely in the past? Well, it was really hard to tell because you didn't have professional help. You had volunteers. You had me. You had, sitting there trying to figure out, is the phone bill too high? I don't know. Well, we spent $1,000 on this last year. They're asking for $1,200. Is that reasonable? I don't know. Now you've got much more accountability, much more ability to do these things. The selectmen appoint many committees. The selectmen appoint at the Conservation Commission, and if I started naming all the committees, you can't believe how many committees there are. I'm sure there's a committee to oversee the committees or something, but a lot of the selectmen appoint a lot of those, and a lot of them are important. The zoning board, the Conservation Commission, who else? Board of Health, right? I think the Board of Health is partially appointed by the selectmen. So the selectmen play a huge role in determining what kind of town we are and what happens along the way. And the school committee certainly does too on the school side. One other role that may have come into sharp focus in the last year or so is that when you get to the subject of overrides, and we're not talking about any specific overrides tonight, this is informational, but when it comes to the topic of overrides, there is one way and one way only that an override gets put on the ballot, and that's that at least 3 members of the Board of Selectmen vote to put it on. There is no petition, there is no special act, there is no special rule. That is the only way it ever gets on the ballot, is if 3 selectmen vote to put it on. And if they don't, then it never gets before the voters. And that's a very important responsibility that the Board of Selectmen has, and makes them key players in the budget thing, along with a lot of other things. That's kind of really quickly, and again, we're glossing over this really fast, but that's sort of the executive branch. The legislative branch is an open town meeting, and with an open town meeting, if you're a registered voter in town, then you are a member of the legislative branch of town government. We're an open town meeting, and basically everything has to be approved by town meeting. And we have a 0 quorum at our town meeting, which means that if you show up to discuss the $50 million annual budget, and you are the only person in the audience, we will go ahead and we will discuss and we will vote on that $50 million budget. And you'll probably have a big influence in how the vote goes. But that's the way we did it. We did it. We used to have a quorum. We don't anymore because, frankly, once we eliminated the quorum, we found out that people were so worried that other people were going to show up and pass stuff that they started showing up more often than they did when we had a quorum. Because believe me, there is no better way to appeal to people to get to a town meeting than to make them afraid that someone's going to pass something they don't want to pass. Some people might think that's sad. It's human nature. It's the way it is and the way it goes. Town meetings. Boy, there are a lot of ways to explain town meetings. The open town meeting is the purest form of democracy left in local governments. It pretty much exists only in New England these days. Most of the country has county government or has like town council kind of things where you elect so many people to a town council and they are the ones who really do it. In New England, primarily, there are 3 forms of government: open town meeting, representative town meeting, and a town council form. There are a few other hybrids, but those are the main ones. And open town meeting is the most popular, or at least the most prevalent. It's just a big group. You come, you vote, and you go home. I'm the moderator. I've run town meetings with like 30 people. I've run town meetings with 2,500 people. I can tell you that the thing that 90% of those attending town meeting want more than anything else when they attend the town meeting is to go home. There are people who truly enjoy town meeting and who love the exercise in democracy and love doing it, but I guarantee you most of them are there for 1 or 2 specific things. They'll stay to that, and then they just want to get home. They have lives. When I tell people, and I tell them all the time, that your government depends on you coming out to a school auditorium or gym on a Monday night and voting on a $50 million budget, they look at me and go, "What?" And I'm saying, "No, I'm serious. I mean, that's really what you do." But that's what we do. You can come to town meeting as long as you're a registered voter. You come, you sit. Town meetings happen at least twice a year. There's a spring town meeting and a fall town meeting. This is set by our town bylaws and our town charter. The spring town meeting is basically considered the financial town meeting. That's where the budget is passed. So that's always probably the bigger town meeting or the more anticipated town meeting because that's where everything happens. Where all the budget stuff. The fall town meeting, which happens like in October generally, is supposed to be reserved more for transfers as you're adjusting in the year and for like passing bylaws and doing business kind of stuff, the boring kind of business stuff. As you might imagine, the budget meeting tends to attract people more than the other meeting because it's more exciting. But then I don't want to get into too much detail, and I never know where to draw the line on these things, but our bylaws say that the annual town meeting must be held in the months of April, May, or June. And the fall town meeting must be held in the months of, I think it's September, October, November. The Board of Selectmen are the ones who decide when the meetings are and where they're going to be. Now, they often consult with other people, but they basically do that. They have the power to do that. They also, a special town meeting, which is different from the annual, they can also call a special town meeting, but a special town meeting can be called by, I think it's 200 signatures of registered voters. So if Peter gets 200 signatures because he has an article that he wants and he doesn't want to wait till the next town meeting, and he gets 200 people to sign it to call a special town meeting, then he turns it into the selectmen, the signatures are certified, and the selectmen then have a set amount of days in which they must call and hold a special town meeting. So the citizens do have input, even though the selectmen control, when the town meetings are. The selectmen control them, they decide where they are. After that, once the meeting starts, then the town meeting is in the hands of the moderator. The moderator doesn't get to do much, but the moderator does run town meeting. And basically, the moderator is pretty much the final word at town meeting. The moderator makes decisions, decides whether a subject is within the bounds of the original, motion, decides who speaks, decides, the order of speakers, decides all matters. Even though we have town council at our town's attorney at town meeting, the final decision on all matters, whether it's legal to vote on a question, whether it all that rests with your town moderator. So the town moderator is the word at town meeting. The town moderator also appoints the town finance committee, which is an 11-member board, which, by the way, I have a vacancy on the finance committee. So we'll explain that later, and I'll be looking around at you all like red meat. But town meeting, once it's called, the selectmen open what's called a warrant. The warrant is the list of articles that are being proposed to be acted upon at town meeting. Articles get on the warrant either by the selectmen putting them on. If a department head submits an article, I believe our charter says that it has to be included on the town meeting warrant. And for an annual town meeting, any petition article that's signed by 10 registered voters, the selectmen must put that article on the warrant. For a special town meeting, I believe it's 100 signatures to put an article on the warrant. So if you have an article that you want to, I don't want to say zoning because that's a whole different ballgame, but if you have an article you want to change a town bylaw, you want to make it illegal to drive by the common after midnight or some such thing, then if you get, once a warrant is opened, if you get 10 signatures, you can put that on the ballot and it will be voted on when it comes to town meeting. So there's plenty of access to the warrant. The warrant is a list of articles. When the selectmen have to declare when the warrant is open, like right now, the warrant for the fall town meeting, which is in October, I think October 17th or something like that, is open. And it will close, I believe, at the end of August. So right now, if you had an article you wanted to put on, you could do that. So the selectmen have to declare and publicize when the warrant is open and when it's going to close. And they have to accept articles in that thing.
How do they do that? How do they notify that it's open? Is that just through the Sun Chronicle, or is that?
It's spelled out in the town charter and in our bylaws, and it's somewhat dated. The way they practically do it is they tell the newspapers, they put it on the website, they advertise it in all those ways. The way legally they do it is our charter says something like it must be posted in at least 7 public places, including, I think, this church and probably St. Mary's, and the post office, like people still go to the post office, and the town hall, and other places. That part of it probably needs to be updated, quite a bit. But there are specific things that are more traditional than anything else, where it must be posted, and it also must be advertised. So, and they do it at their meeting, they advertise it, it's in the paper, it's on cable, and it is posted. If you happen to go into the post office, it'll be posted there, and probably posted somewhere else around in public places. So they they do that, and now you get, oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think if you're on any of the town like email distribution lists, you also get an email notification because we did receive one.
Yes, that's a good
So
point.
if you get anything from the town that gets emailed to you, you should also get the notice.
Yeah, I know they've really tried to make an effort on that. If you've logged into the website or you've done something, they try to get your email and they try to send it to you. Once the warrant closes, now there's a list of articles, and these lists of articles are all over the place. Some of them are the standard articles you see every year to authorize the town's ability to borrow. That's an article that's always on the town meeting where it has to be voted on every year. It's a state law. It's kind of crazy, but we do it every year. You also have to vote to accept your Chapter 70 funds, your highway funds every year because that's a state law. And so we vote on it every year. People sit around and go, I don't know what it means, but we're getting money, I'll vote for it. So we do that. So there are a lot of regular things. Then the budget is one article, basically. One big article with page after page of stuff. And I'm going to get to the budget process a little later, but we have you have the budget, and then you could have bylaws proposed. You could have we've had articles in the recent past about billboards, about cleaning the water bodies in town, about doing anything. These are articles on the warrant. They're submitted, and you might when you first look at the warrant, it might say to see if the town will vote to adopt a bylaw regulating when people can be on the town common, or take any other action relative thereto. That's the magic phrase, or take any other action relative thereto. It's stuck at the end of every possible article because someone a long time ago said that gives you pretty much flexibility to make it do almost anything you want and change the wording. And so that's the first thing you learn when you come to town meeting is or take any other action relative thereto. But that's always in the list of articles. And that's, and you might say, to see if the town will vote a sum of money to clean up the Norton Reservoir. You don't have to put an amount in. You don't have to put how you're doing it. You just have to put in, to hold a place as an article in the warrant, that you're warning the voters that they're going to vote to spend a sum of money on cleaning up the Norton Reservoir. That's the article. When it gets to town meeting, now there's a difference between the article and the motion. Okay? So the article just says, to see if the town will vote to to raise and appropriate a sum of money to clean up the Norton Reservoir. Now, when it's moved, the Finance Committee, which has probably already heard it, or whoever moves it from the floor stands up and says, Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to spend the sum of $1,732,684 to be spent with XYZ Company to clean weeds from the Norton Reservoir, and that said work be done by such and such a date or whatever it is. Boom, and they don't say or take any other action relative thereto, because that's a really good thing to have in your article, but it can't be in your motion because your motion has to be specific. So now the moderator's first job when he hears the motion is to compare it to the article and say, is the motion within the scope of the article? So if your motion was to spend, if your motion originally said to spend a sum of money to clean up the Norton Reservoir, and then that article, and then the motion was to spend $1,700,000, whatever I said, on cleaning it up and doing all this, well, yeah, okay. The article said you're going to spend money on cleaning up the reservoir. The motion says that too. Now let's get specific. We can vote on that. Now, if instead, the article said to see if it spend a sum of money on voting on cleaning up the Norton Reservoir, and now someone stood up and said, I move that we spend $1,700,000 to clean up Lake Winnicunnet. Well, now somebody seconds it and we're ready to vote. Now the moderator says, whoa, that's not within the scope of the original article. Yes, it's cleaning up a body of water, but it's not the body of water that you warned the townspeople in the warrant that they would be voting on. You're doing a little bait and switch here. You can't exceed the scope of the original article. So the moderator, or at least a good moderator, would say, no, I'm sorry, but I'm going to rule that motion is beyond the scope of the original article, and I will not accept the motion. So you have to keep the motion within the scope of the article. I'm trying. Yes.
Your example of cleaning the reservoir, say I put the article on and went to town meeting and then motioned that it's going to cost $1.5 million to do it. then how does the money get raised in order to do that? Like, what's that next step?
Well, when you, and again, I'm probably going to get more complicated than I need to be, but it's a very good question. When you put an article on, generally, especially something like that, the article will probably say, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, or borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money to do whatever. And that allows 3 different options. Because town meetings can do like 3 things. You can raise and appropriate. If you raise and appropriate a sum of money, then you're adding it directly to the tax rate. Okay, you're now going into your Prop 2.5 limit. You're adding it to the taxes. It's going to be raised by taxation. That's how we spend a good chunk of our money. If the motion is to borrow or bond a sum of money, well, now that's a different source. Now that the cost of that still gets added to the tax rate, but now you're bonding maybe over 20 years. So it's a much less of an impact on a year-to-year basis, and borrowing requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting as opposed to raising and appropriating only requiring a majority vote. And then the other thing is sometimes it's transferring from funds. Sometimes you're taking money out of the stabilization fund, which is the town savings account, and you're transferring it to the project to clean up the reservoir. So now you're taking money that you've already had, and you're just moving it from your left pocket to your right pocket. That has no effect on the tax rate. So that's a whole different thing. Although sometimes, like to take from the stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote because we have a bylaw that says it requires a 2/3 vote. So there are basically, those are the 3 different ways. You raise and appropriate, you transfer from available funds, or you borrow. You can put all 3 in the article, but in the motion, sometimes in the motion, it might be $1,700,000, and you say, I want to raise and appropriate $500,000, transfer from the stabilization account $500,000, and borrow whatever the balance is, $750,000, and bond that. You can put all of those into one motion if you're specific. As soon as you put borrowing in, it automatically advances to the threshold of a 2/3 vote, even though it's not all done. But those are the 3 basic ways that you would do that, and you would spend the money.
Bill, can you approach them one by one? Like, can you say, I'd like to appropriate, and if that gets voted down, can you then raise a motion to try and borrow? And if that's that's a little cheesy, but is that allowed?
No, because it's one motion, and you could amend it, and I'm going to get into amendments, too. But you could amend it. You could say, hey, I want to offer an amendment. I want to change that to be all borrowed or all transferred out of stabilization or something like that. And if your motion is seconded, then we have an amendment, which I'll get into how we handle amendments. And then we have to vote on it again. But no, you can't split it out because it's all laid out in one sequence.
One other question. In your Government 101, you say all town meeting warrants and articles must be submitted to the Finance Committee for their recommendation. So do they have, therefore, the ability to not allow an article, or do they just give a yay or a nay recommendation at the time that the article is raised?
Good. Let me explain this. I'll get into the budget process and explain. It'll take me a minute to get to your answer, but in the way the budget works, the town manager by town charter is charged starting in, I believe, it's January or February. The town manager must take a look at our town, what he thinks our town is going to take in, and what we have in available revenues, and notify the Board of Selectmen and the school committee and the finance committee as to what those figures are. So in other words, the town manager says, I think we're going to get $50 million in state aid this year. Now, I will tell you that there is not a town manager in the state of Massachusetts that knows in January or February what their state aid figure is going to be. In fact, the people who are going to vote the state aid figure don't know what the state aid figure is going to be. And most of the time, they don't even tell you until after you've already voted and used your figure. But unfortunately for us in the cities and towns, we have to follow rules while the legislature just gets to go and make it up on their own. So the town manager has to take that and say, okay, this is what I anticipate our revenues are going to be, this is what we have in funds, and now that's the framework which I'm going to start working on the budget. And then the town manager starts working on the budget. Town manager talks to all the department heads, goes through the whole thing, sits with the school committee. The big thing is what the school budget is going to be, because the school budget accounts for 60 or 70% of the entire town budget. And the town manager is charged with coming up with a recommended budget. Again, it's not the selectmen, not the school committee, nobody else, it's the town manager who comes up with a recommended budget. Now he has this budget. Let's say it's up $3 million. And he knows we don't have $3 million based on what we say, so he's going to try to cut it down. Maybe we only have room to go up $1 million or $1.5 million. He now takes this budget, and when he's complete with it, and it has to be within a certain time, I believe it's sometime in March, he then, by town bylaw and charter, must give it to the finance committee. Finance committee is 11 people appointed by the town moderator. From my point of view, it's the best committee in town, and I don't mean performance-wise, I mean it's the best committee to be on in town because it deals, in essence, with every department. The finance committee has no real power. It can't really do anything, except there's one fund that's the FinCom reserve that has some money in it, and they're the only ones that can transfer out at the end. But that's relatively minor. But what the finance committee is charged with is making recommendations on all matters that go before town meeting. So every article that goes before town meeting has to be reviewed by the finance committee. And it's reviewed in a lot of detail. And they go over, including the budget, and they go over it with the town manager. The town manager spends, I can't even tell you how many nights, aside from the nights that he spends formulating the budget, he then spends a lot of nights going and talking with the finance committee in public meetings, and discussing it and debating it and going over it and who should get what and what should happen here. They go through all this. At the end, the FinCom has to have its report out, I think it's a week or 2 weeks before the start of town meeting. It used to be a lot sooner, but things happen faster now. The FinCom must distribute out to the public. We used to have to mail a copy of a written FinCom report to every home in the town of Norton. They stopped that because it wasn't making any sense anymore. But they make their recommendations public. Their recommendations carry a lot of weight because people like us, were saying, hey, we didn't have time to go over that $50 million budget in any great detail, but these people did. And they're regular people. They're, they're people who volunteer. They don't get paid. So they get to look at it. And so they get a lot of stock put in it. But what makes the FinCom powerful and what makes the FinCom so important is that our charter states that on all articles that the FinCom recommends to town meeting, the FinCom will make the main motion. Now that doesn't sound like it's all that important, but it is. Because there are years when the FinCom has now agreed on a budget. The town manager who put the budget together doesn't agree with what they came up with. The Board of Selectmen maybe doesn't agree with either the town managers or the FinComs. And the school committee maybe doesn't agree with any of the other three. So you've all got people now who I guarantee you, if that were not in place, all three of them would be out in town meeting going, hey, Mr. Moderator, hey, get me first. Because they want to get up and they want to make the motion that puts their proposal on the table. And then if anyone wants to change it, well, they have to amend that figure. The people who wrote our bylaws and our charter said, no, we want the finance committee to do that. So the finance committee makes the main motion. And now, if anybody wants to change it, they've got to go through the amendment process. They've got to go through all this stuff. So that is a huge advantage because, again, it's human nature. If something is recommended and now you're going to change it, people automatically go, wait a minute. Why are they changing it? What's here? It's always an advantage to be first and be the original. So this is what the FinCom does. They do it on the budget. They do it on non-financial articles. In a lot of towns, the finance committee is called the advisory committee. Because really, they're not so much financial as they are just advisory. So that's the role. That's why you'll notice, if you come to town meeting, you'll notice that I'll say Article 2. And by the way, just a little bit of trivia. You'll always notice at the spring annual town meeting that we start with Article 2. We never start with Article 1. And is there anybody who's not named Bramwell or hasn't had a town office who knows why we start with Article 2 and don't start with Article 1? Reason is that Article 1 of the town meeting is your town election. You know, electing town officers is actually part of town meeting. But that's Article 1, and that happens like a week or 2 weeks before. We used to have, in the old days, town meeting used to be like in March, and then we'd have election of officers in April. So, you know, we'd actually be in the middle of town meeting. We'd actually have town meeting one night, and there'd be a selectman sitting on the stage, and then we'd come back the next week, because town meeting, believe it or not, town meeting used to take 4 or 5 nights. 4 or 5 nights, I'm talking 7 to 11, on Monday, Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday, Monday. That's how long you should go. No word of a lie. You think it's bad now. But there'd be a selectman up there, and then on Monday, and then we'd have the election on Wednesday, there'd be a different selectman up there. And there's nothing like being a brand new selectman coming in and suddenly having to defend the budget that you had absolutely nothing to do with in putting it together. That's always fun. But so now you get up, and that's why I turn and I'll go, all right, Article 2. And you'll hear the FinCom chairman go, Mr. Moderator. And I go, yes, Mr. FinCom chairman, I move that the town. And they do that. Now, if the FinCom does not recommend an article, then they won't say anything. And now it's open to the floor. Any member of town meeting, any registered voter can stand up and say, I would like to move Article 2. Except you can't just stand up and say, I'd like to move Article 2. Because the moderator goes, oh, really? And what would you like to do with Article 2? You have to have it in writing. You have to have the wording. You have to say, Mr. Moderator, I move that the town, blah, 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 spend this much money, do this. And you have to come up and you have to give it to us, and it has to be seconded. And now it's just like the Finance Committee moved it, once it's moved. Right? And that's how it goes. But you can understand why people are very interested in getting the Finance Committee's recommendation. Because it's a lot easier, and they'll defend it, they'll argue it, they'll do all these things. So getting the FinCom to recommend your article is a huge advantage and a huge step, and that's what makes the FinCom very important and very powerful, even though they really don't have any authority.
And it usually prevents a lot of the amendment things from even starting, because it's already been scrutinized and people have already thought about it, and by the time it gets through FinCom, it's been scrutinized probably more than most.
Yeah, that's very true. People tend to give more credence to stuff that the FinCom has recommended because somebody's looked at it. You know, and the same, if the FinCom doesn't recommend it, they're immediately going, wait a minute, what's wrong? And the FinCom, even on articles they don't recommend, after it's moved, they'll say, Mr. Moderator, let me explain why the FinCom voted against this, and they'll explain their position and do all that. But it makes the FinCom, and the meetings between the people writing the articles and the FinCom is where the real discussion happens. Okay? People think that by going to town meeting and listening now to the motion, they're actually in the decision-making part. No, not really. You're actually at the end. I will tell you, God forgive me, I'm sure there's a lightning bolt coming, but a lot of what town meeting does is rubber stamping. Okay? Most of the work is done long before. Okay? Long before. Now, there are exceptions. There are exceptions. There are times when the town meeting says to the town leaders, we don't care what you did. We don't like that. We're going to do something different, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they're right. There's nothing you can do about it. And believe me, that used to happen a lot in the 70s and the 80s. And, when I tell you the town meeting took 4 or 5 nights, I mean, seriously, it took 4 or 5 nights. The budget alone could take 2 nights. Easily. But now you're here. You're in town meeting. How does town meeting work? Let's talk about the budget. When we go to the budget, now you've got the budget down, and we try to put up, the way we've done it now, it's not the way we've done it in the past, but, I mean, for a long time, but now we try to put up on the screen, we try to have on the warrant, all the list of all the different offices. And it's broken down, on the town side, it's broken down between expenses and salaries. Because in almost all the departments, that's how your budget's broken down. You can have a line for telephone, you can have a line for computer, you can have a line for this and that, but those are all expenses. Then you can employ 15 people, all their salaries are in one salary side of the budget. And you can play with that salary side, and you can pay one person more, one person less, as long as you don't break union contracts or whatever. And on the expense side, maybe you had budgeted $1,000 for telephone, and instead you spent $2,000, but you took it from someplace else. You can play with those figures, but you can't say, hey, we laid off a person, and so we saved on salary. Now I'm going to take that salary money and I'm going to buy paper with it. That's a no-go. Only town meeting can transfer from salaries to expenses. Nobody else. You can have $1 million in your salary account, and you can be out of office supplies, and there's nothing you can do. You can't take that $1 million and buy a ream of paper or a couple pens, okay? Because you don't have the authority. Only town meeting. If you go to town meeting can say, I move and transfer some of that money over from salaries to expenses, and that can be done. So, except the school department.
Right.
Okay? The school department, and this is not the school department's choice, this is state law. The school department gets one big pool of money. They divide it up in salaries and expenses for purposes of explaining it to town meeting. But they're not bound by it. They can tell you that it's $15 million salaries and $10 million expenses, and they can spend $40 million on, or $25 million on salary and nothing on expenses if they want. They don't, because it doesn't make sense. But they're not bound the same way. That, over time, over the years, has caused a lot of animosity between the town side and the school side. Yes?
Who did you say sets that law, the state or it's the town?
The state. Yeah, it used to be worse, believe it or not. We used to have this thing called fiscal autonomy for school committees. It changed in, I think it was 93 when they did the Education Act. But before that time, most of the time when I was a town official, the school department, the school committee decided what their budget was going to be. And that was it. Okay? Town meeting could change the budget. They could, cut it and say, no, we're not going to give you $15 million, we're only going to give you $10 million. But in 100% of the court cases that followed, the law of fiscal autonomy was upheld, and the town would lose and would have to give the school department the money. So, up until the early 90s, whatever the school department said their budget was, their budget was. That's just the way it went. Now, schools tended to work with, town side. And remember that at this point, there's a lot of times there was no town manager. So it was even harder because you had a school superintendent dealing with a 3 or 5 member board of selectmen. And hey, I've been a selectman. Let me tell you, it's you can do a lot of things, but try getting in the middle of a $20, $30, $50 million budget and try dealing with a professional who knows exactly where everything is and try dealing with that. It's not easy. That doesn't happen anymore. Now, the school department submits it, and the town manager really decides how much he's going to do, and the school committee can ask for more, and you can go back and forth. We have this thing called proposition, and I'm skipping around, but I'm trying to, every time I get to one point, I realize I haven't explained this. We have this thing called Proposition 2.5. It's very misunderstood, and it would take 27 weeks to fully explain the way Proposition 2.5 works, but basically, it limits your levy limit. Your levy limit is the amount that you can raise from the property tax. Okay? Generally in Norton, our revenue is it's not quite, but it's roughly 50-50. We get about 50% of our total revenue from state aid, from the legislature, and about 50% from the property tax. Now, it's a little off, as Joan could tell you, because there are other sources of revenue. There are licenses and fees that make up different parts of it, but that's just a ballpark thing, just to make it easy. So the amount you raised from taxation, let's say it was, $50 million. If you raised $50 million last year, then, the total amount of your property evaluation, if you raised $50 million by the property tax, and it's because the value of your town property was $2 billion, whatever it is. The value of your town property was this. You're only allowed to increase the amount that you raised by taxation by 2.5% of what you did last year, plus any new growth added on. So if somebody builds a home, somebody on an industrial complex comes in, that gets added on. Now people say, well, okay, so that means you go up 2.5% in your budget. No, because you have to remember that property tax only accounts for 50% of your revenue that you have. So if your 2.5% revenue increase allows you to go up 2.5%, obviously, then that's really only a 1.25% increase in what you can spend, because that's only 50% of your revenue. Now, if your state aid goes down, which usually coincides with election year for the legislature, state aid goes up. Non-election year for the legislature, state aid goes down or stays the same. And by the way, I don't want to be bad, but I do want to take a minute and recognize, because Michael Toole is here tonight, and Michael is one of our own from Norton, and Michael is sticking his head in the noose and running for state representative this year, so I don't want to think I'm making legislative jokes at him, but
No, not really.
yeah, we're certainly thankful that, Michael is running, and folks, it's been about 150 years since anyone represented Norton in the state legislature. Since anyone from Norton was in the state legislature. 150 years. I just tell you that, and I'm sure Michael might point that out. But it's good of Michael to come. I know he's here because he's a parent and a citizen and all that. But I also want to recognize that he's running and thank him for coming tonight. But if your state aid goes down, then even though your property tax, you got that 2.5% and went up, you might actually have to cut your budget. And then I want you to try to explain to taxpayers who are saying, hey, we're saying, listen, we have a deficit, we have to cut our budget. And the taxpayer's looking at you like, listen, pal, here's my tax bill. My tax bill went up. Okay? You're charging me more money for taxes than you did last year, and you're telling me that you have to cut your budget. I think you're an idiot, and you're not spending my money wisely. Okay? And you can understand that. It's it's pretty valid. They're saying, how can my taxes go up? And you tell them you don't have any money. Well, this is one of the ways. This is one. And plus, you get locked into contracts. You get, all the labor union contracts, the school teachers contracts, the police contracts, the fire contracts. When having been a part of probably 25 town budgets, having played an active part in at least 25 town budgets over the years, I can tell you that when you take out what we refer to as fixed costs that we really don't have a lot of control over because of either contracts, state mandates, which is another whole area. The state tells you that you must spend this much on it, and then they don't give you any money to do it, and all these things. When you get right down to it, the total percentage of your budget that is actually discretionary, that you can actually control without running afoul of a contractual obligation or a state mandate, tends to be between about 5 and 10%. Okay, about 5 to 10% of your town budget is really discretionary. Now, you can have massive layoffs, and that's additional and above and beyond. But see, I'm a genius because I figured out exactly what it is, what the townspeople want, not just in Norton, but everywhere. And I don't understand why people just don't do it. I mean, what everybody wants is they want to pay lower taxes, and they want to have more services. And if town officials would just do that, we wouldn't have any problems. You know, but it doesn't work that way. You can have mismanagement, you can have all kinds of issues, you can have all kinds of problems. There's no one thing that causes us to have budgets. But I don't want to get into too much of that. I want you to understand how it then affects as it goes into town meeting. So when we get into, yes, I'm sorry.
I just had a question. Does the FinCom do the same level of scrutiny on the school budgets as they do on the general town budget? Is this the same process?
Yes.
That's a really good question. I think they would tell you yes. I would tell you no. The school department is always forthcoming. They always come and they always explain their budget. They do it in detail. And this particular superintendent, by the way, is probably the most open and most, like, here are the books, go ahead and take a look, probably that I've ever seen. He's very good at that. But it's really hard. If you've ever looked at a school budget, I can't figure it out. I don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I could see certain money aside for certain things. I asked them what this line item means, and they explain it to me, and it's complicated. It's not that they're trying to make it complicated, it's just that it's complicated. And then I see another item, and they explain it to me, and I sit there and I go, it sounds like what the other one was for. I don't quite understand. And they go into great detail, and they know. They know, and they have a reason for it. But it's just really hard. And you don't have the salary expense thing. So a lot of times, my opinion, strictly my opinion, and FinCom might disagree, even though I appoint them, I think they just say, you know what, if their budget is up 2%, it's up 2%. How they spend it, they can spend it any way they want. So I'm really not getting into the same detail on the school side as I do on the town side.
Yeah, because you truly don't know what's discretionary unless you know what's in the budget.
Yes. And don't get me wrong, it's not that the school department won't give you the details. They will give you the details. They will give you details until your eyeballs want to roll out of your head. And it's not that they're making it hard, it's that it is hard. My friend, Mr. Freeman, one of the things that he said that I always remember is, he said, when we were talking about why sometimes there is almost no discussion on a $28 million school budget at town meeting, but then if we have an article to buy 10 brooms for the highway department, we'll discuss it for 45 minutes. And his answer was as good as any answer I've ever heard. He said, the reason is that there are very few people in the audience who understand $28 million school budgets. But damn it, everybody knows something about a broom. And so, now when we know something about the things, we're going to talk about them. And that's really true. And it's true with the FinCom, it's true with town meeting, it's true with town officials. How many people here could really intelligently discuss the details of a $28 million school budget? I know there are some. I'm not one of them. I can tell you, I'm just not. I probably could if you made me. But how many people at home, how many people that are going to come out, 100, 150 people that are going to come out to a town meeting, are going to spend time looking at a $28 million school budget? Or for that matter, are going to look at a $5 or $10 million police budget or a fire department budget? The mere numbers today have made town meeting more difficult. Look, again, I'm trying not to be political because I'm supposed to be factual. I'm the town moderator. I'm in charge of town meeting. I'm supposed to advance town meeting. I think Norton has outgrown town meeting. I don't think we should have town meeting anymore. I think we should have a council where people can go and elect people directly and people should talk to, because I think what town meeting does these days is rubber stamp. And it's the same way in all towns. There are almost never amendments to the budget. Almost never. okay? So we make a big deal out of, hey, the town meeting, we went and we approved that budget and they needed us and we approved it. Oh yeah, we approved exactly what they asked for. And all we did was stamp it at the end. Now, every once in a while, it doesn't happen that way, and usually when it doesn't, it's something on the bigger side, so it can be very important. But it's very, very difficult to discuss the details. And that's why I point out that the FinCom meetings, now the department head or the town manager or the school superintendent is talking directly to the FinCom, and they're getting into the nuts and bolts. They're getting into the numbers, why things happen, how they happen, the real impact. That's where you learn. That's where the discussion is. If you think you're going to go to town meeting and you're going to listen to the discussion at town meeting and you're going to learn about the details of the $50 million budget, you are wrong. Town meeting really is not the place where budgets or things are discussed. Town meeting is the place where they're decided. And there's a big difference between being discussed and being decided. And that's what happens, right now. I mean, you know what happens. If we discuss anything for more than 10 minutes, somebody's moving the question. Somebody is going, no, we've done this. We don't want to, we don't want to hear about this. We've already gone there. So yeah, Karen, did you?
So I am that person that doesn't have a clue about anything, and that's why I'm here tonight. But so are those discussion meetings open to the public? Like,
Yes.
if you're interested in finding out why there is a $28 million school budget and you really want to know,
Yes.
can you go find out someplace?
Yes, and one of the great things is that, like with the Finance Committee is basically forbidden from holding executive session. I spent 15 years as a member of the Finance Committee who never held an executive session. I can't ever remember a Finance Committee holding an executive session, so everything is done out in the open. Everything is public. Our friends at Norton Community Television now broadcast virtually every meeting. And not only do they broadcast it, but they tape it and they put it on demand. And so you can go and you can watch. You can, now, I'm trying to picture anybody who's not as nerdy as me in town government actually calling up a finance committee meeting and watching it to learn about town government. Okay, first of all, I'm assuming they don't have kids, because otherwise the kids would be running around and going, yeah, get me this, get me that, do that, and they probably aren't married because their spouse, probably would be going, hey, aren't we going out to dinner? What are I mean, there are a lot of things that prevent it. I still do it. I still, I'll watch some of the meetings and I'll do that. But we keep thinking that if we just make information more available. People say with town meetings, the problem with town meeting is if we just made everything more available and we got more information to people, and now they can all get this stuff, that they'd all would suddenly go, I could have had a V8. Now I understand this. It was just that I didn't have access to it. Now I have access to it. Now I understand everything. No, it doesn't work that way. You have more access to information about town government now than any people who have ever had that access on the planet. Right? People today in town, the regular citizens have more access and easy access to information than anybody's ever had before in the history of the world. And we don't know. Town meeting doesn't attract people. And we keep saying, well, it's the people's fault. No, not really. It's really not. When 95% of your legislators, and the town meeting is a legislative body, when 95% of your legislators don't come on a regular basis, okay, because if we get 500 people to a town meeting, that's a tremendous, that's a tremendous thing. So 95% of our registered voters don't come to town meeting. And we say, well, it's the system's fault. And we say it's the people's fault. It's not the system. The system would just work if they came. Well, let me tell you, I've run a town meeting. I've had Walter be my assistant moderator when we had a town meeting with like 2,000, 2,500 people. Everything slows to a crawl. You can't accomplish anything. Acting on a single article can take an hour. if the same percentage of people want to debate something as do on a, when you have 150 people, just the debate portion can take hours. All people want to do is go home. So, I've got all these people. The two biggest complaints that I get as the moderator about town meeting is, number one, I want to go home. And number two, why can't we just come in and vote and go home? Okay? People don't want to discuss it. Most of them have already made up their mind before they get there. They think it's an election. They just want to come in, vote, and go home. And I tell them, no, you have to sit and you have to listen to the debate. And they're like, why? Because that's the rules. I don't write them, I just enforce them. And this is what happens, and this is why town meeting is so difficult. It's not a spectator sport, it's a participation sport. You as citizens have a real responsibility, like it or not. You have a real responsibility that I guarantee you most of you neglect on a regular basis. And you're not alone. 95 to 98% of your peers do the same thing. And yet we tell you it's your fault. We don't change the system that 98% of people, think. We tell you, oh, it's your fault. Of course, if you all decided to come, we wouldn't know what the hell to do with it. Okay, we wouldn't have a clue. Government would stop, and we'd be totally screwed. So we have a system that really doesn't work well when people don't attend, and really doesn't work well when people do attend. You might want to think about changing that. But that's another whole thing. My job is not to change the system. My job is to run the system and do it as best we can with the rules that we have given. Yes, Bob?
I just want to say 8 o'clock, so I just wanted you to know that, to keep us kind of on track with what we want to accomplish for the next hour-ish, but I know you wanted to leave maybe some time at the end for questions too. And then also, in case anybody came in late, invite anybody who wants to eat the food and have some drinks and things like that. That's in the back, because I don't want to take it home, and I don't think everybody else who brought contributions to either. So please feel free to get up. It's not a big deal. It'll make a little bit of noise, and get something to eat now or any time in the next hour.
That was the official electrical charge going off of my chair to remind me that because I could do this all night and I could do it. So let me get back to town meeting, okay? And again, we're hopping around here because one subject leads to the other, and it's always difficult. One of the things that I think some of you want to know is, okay, when I go to town meeting, I don't know the rules. What do I do? How do I don't even know how anything works. You've got the warrant, you've got the articles, now you've got the motion. Okay, the motion comes up. You're sitting in the audience, and you get to listen to the debate on it, and you get to decide, and you're going to end up voting yes or no on the article. Let's say that the motion is to spend $1 million to take weeds out of the reservoir. So you listen to the debate, and you say, you know what? They should be able to do that for $500,000. There's no reason to spend $1 million. So you get brave and you raise your hand and you're recognized by the moderator. And this is a good time to say that anybody can speak at town meeting. The only requirement is that, number one, you be a registered voter in the town. And number two, you be properly recognized by the moderator. And the way we do that is we have microphones. We ask people to go to the microphones and stand there and wait in line. And then the moderator eventually recognizes you. When you address town meeting, the rules, and by the way, all the rules of town meeting, people think we're run by Robert's Rules or we're run by that. All the rules of town meeting are run by this book, which is called Town Meeting Time. Norton adopted it, I think, in 1974, when then moderator Joe Yell got to do it. It's the Bible for a lot of town meetings in Massachusetts and in New England. And it basically sets the rules, only superseded by specific town bylaws or regulations. But you come in and so you want to do this. So you stand up and you get recognized by the moderator. And when you address the town meeting, you always do it through the moderator. Apparently, moderators are very insecure, and you must make them feel very important. But the rules say, because they don't want people going back and forth. They don't want you to get up and say, Mary Lou said, and hey, Mary Lou, you can't say that. So you address the moderator. It's Mr. Moderator, I would like to propose an amendment to the article. Okay, now, that's a formal thing. And the moderator says, okay, what's your amendment? And now you have to have your amendment written out so that you can present it to the clerk and to the moderator. And so now you change that to say, I move to amend Article 2 to say that the town spend $500,000, from available funds to take weeds from the reservoir. And you bring it up and you hand it to us. And then the person next to you says, I second that. Okay, so now we have the main motion, which has already been moved and seconded, and now we have an amendment. The way the amendment works is as soon as you have an amendment, the moderator now says, okay, all discussion now will be on the amendment. So the question is now no longer should we spend $1 million to take weeds out of the reservoir. The question is, should we change that $1 million to $500,000? And all the discussion must be restricted to that change and to the amendment. Now, there's obviously overlap. It's really hard, and moderators will give a lot of leeway because what are you going to say? How do you divide that? But still, if someone gets up and just starts speaking to the article in general, the moderator will interrupt them and say, listen, I'm sure what you're saying is right and valid, but how does it affect changing from $1 million to $500,000? That's what we're focused on now. That's what we're going to restrict the discussion to. The discussion isn't now how you're going to get the weeds out. The discussion is what's the difference between the $1 million and the $500,000. So now we have a discussion, and then we vote it. Okay, now the vote comes up, and let's say the amendment passes. And so now the amount has been reduced to $500,000. So now you move on to the next article, right? Nope. Because all you've done is you've changed the article from $1 million to $500,000. Now that becomes the main motion as amended. Okay? And now we have to vote again. And now it's open for discussion again. So now it's just like the original article, except the figure is $500,000 instead of $1 million. Okay? And so we discuss it, and we're just about ready to move, and Walter pops up and says, you know what? I think it should be $750,000. And after people boo and pelt him with garbage and things, then it's seconded, and now we've got another motion, and that's proper, and we'll do it. And now we're in the middle of discussing it, and now Kerry pops up and says, you know what? I think it should be $850,000. And so now we already have an amendment to the motion. Now we have an amendment to the amendment. Okay? The moderator will say, okay, we now have a second amendment. We are now going to move directly to discussion on the second amendment only, and we can't discuss anything else. We're now discussing whether the main motion or the amended motion should become $800,000. Now, if suddenly you stand up and say, wait, I want to make that $900,000, and you lose. Because the moderator will only allow 2 amendments to be on the floor at the same time. So the moderator would say, no, I'm sorry, I appreciate your motion, but I'm going to rule it out of order because we already have 2 amendments on the floor. So now we'll vote on the amendment. The $800,000 loses. So now we're back to the $750,000. We're not back to the to the $500,000 that became the original motion. We're back to the $750,000. So now we'll discuss that again, and then we'll vote and say that loses. Now we're back to the $500,000, which was changed from the $1 million. Now we got to discuss that again, and then we'll vote, assuming there are no more amendments, and we'll vote on that, and that'll be the final figure. Now the moderator at some point may say, wait a minute, you're trying to change it from $750,000 to $800,000. I think you're just stalling. There's no real purpose to this, and so I'm going to rule your amendment out of order. At which point they say, you can't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And the moderator says, yeah, I can, sorry, but thank you very much. And there's really no appeal. There's really no appeal from the moderator's decision. But a good moderator knows not to push too far. Also, the moderator is an elected position, so, if you're a bad moderator, you'll pay for it eventually. Yes?
So if you want to make an amendment, it doesn't have to be in writing at all.
It does have to be in writing.
It does.
It must be in writing. Every time you...
So they can't just stand up and
No.
say, okay.
No, the first thing the moderator will say is, can you bring me that in writing? And we won't vote on it or discuss it until we have it in writing. It's... Amendments are difficult, but necessary a lot of times. And again, in the past, I've been moderator now for this is my 9th year, and there haven't been, in the last 9 years, there haven't been very many amendments to articles. It used to be commonplace, but in the last 9 years, it's hard to remember. And the few times that I remember them, it was because something got moved and then they realized they left out a word on a legal article or something, and they had to change it to, to make it fit or something like that. But yeah, it has to be in writing, and you do that. So you go ahead and you do that. Those are amendments. When people are speaking, the moderator will generally try to recognize people who haven't spoke to something, to a particular article, before they recognize someone to speak for the second time. So if you were up and you had already spoken to an article, and now we're 5 people later and you're up again, and there's somebody lined up behind you, I may say, listen, I'm sorry, sir, but I'm going to go to the person behind you because they haven't spoken to this article yet, and we'd like to do it. In some towns, and I go to Mass Moderator Association meetings, which if you ever want to be totally bored, go to a Mass Moderator Association. In some towns, they have for mics and against mics. So if you're planning on being for, you go stand at this mic, and if you're against, you go stand at that mic, and the moderator will alternate, back and forth. We don't do that. I don't think that's a good idea. But there are a lot of different ways. The kind of votes that you have at town meeting. The most common vote is a simple show of hands. It used to be a voice vote back in the day, but then people began to seem it wasn't the number of people voting; it was how loud you yelled. So it was really hard for a moderator to say, all those in favor, aye! And all those opposed, no! Well, I couldn't tell if that was 50 yes and 100 no, or if it was just the yeses yelled louder or whatever. So we do it by hand. And the moderator has the discretion to decide whether the yeses or the nos carry the motion. If a matter requires a 2/3 vote, we have a bylaw that says the moderator has the discretion to determine on his own whether or not there was a 2/3 vote without having a standing counted vote. If the moderator is torn and can't decide, because it's not like I'm sitting here going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can't decide whether yes or no, then the moderator can do what they call divide the house, and that's when you say, okay, all those in favor, please rise. And then we have counters appointed by the town clerk who come down and count the people. And then when they're done, it's okay, all those please sit down, all those opposed, please rise. They count those people. At the end, the result has come up, the moderator announces the result, and it's done. On some cases, as I always do with like override votes or things that I know are going to be complicated and controversial, you go to a ballot vote. Ballot votes we bring in the old days, they used to have little pink pieces of paper that were perforated down the middle. One side said yes, one side said no. And if a ballot came up, they passed the ballot box around, you either dropped in your yes or you dropped in your no. I discontinued that because I sat in the audience for a long time, and I saw a lot of people ripping the thing saying, hey, take this yes, and I'm going home, and drop it in the box if they take a vote on this thing. And plus, you'd see people going on the floor picking up extra no's or extra yeses or whatever they wanted and dropping them in the ballot box. So I didn't think that was a good idea. So now we have the regular town election ballot box, we have regular things, and you have to go up and get your hand stamped, and you have to go through it. A ballot at town meeting is bulky. It's difficult. It's not preferable, and we try to avoid it at all costs. Now, if the moderator looks out at the house and you're all those in favor, aye, all those in favor, raise your hand, all those opposed, the moderator says, okay, the ayes have it. If 7 people stand, now Walter stands up and says, Mr. Moderator, point of order. Yes, what's your point of order? By the way, a point of order, you can stand up at any time. If you feel you have a point of order, something that was against the rules, that violated procedure, even if it's in the middle of the person speaking, you can stand up and say, Mr. Moderator, point of order. I will tell you that if I'm moderator and you stand up and interrupt the speaker, you better have a really good point of order. It better be valid. But you can stand up and you say, I disagree with your count. I think the noes had it, and I challenge the count. If 7 people, 6 more people stand with him, then under our bylaws, the the House must be divided, and there must be a count. If Walter stands up and says, Mr. Moderator, I think you're wrong on the count, and I think there should be a ballot vote, and 14 other people rise with him for a total of 15, then the moderator has no choice and must conduct a ballot vote. I don't like telling people that, honestly, because it's, a ballot, in the old days, a ballot vote was used as a weapon. It was used because people knew that it took a long time and people wanted to get home, and if they felt that their people would stay and the other people would go home, if they thought it was going to take a long time, they'd move for a ballot vote just to try to get them to go home so they could win the thing. That's not evil, that's just human nature, it's politics, that's the way it goes. But that is a method that's still today. 7 people stand, you have to count it. 15 people stand, you have to have a ballot vote. You come up now and popular motions. You're debating, and everybody's been debating. We've been discussing this for an hour, and now again I'm picking on Walter. Walter gets up and he says, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move the question. Okay, moving the question is without a doubt the most popular motion at town meeting, and what that means is it's a motion to end debate. Okay, and if it gets a second, strangely enough, the motion to end debate is non-debatable. So we can't debate whether we want to vote on moving the question. We just have to vote on whether to move the question. I don't ever remember a motion to move the question losing. And I've been in town government for more than 40 years, and I don't ever remember one. It probably has, but I don't recall. So you move the question, and the moderator says, all right, the motion is to end debate. If the motion passes, then we will end debate, and we'll proceed directly to a vote on whatever topic we're discussing. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? And now, if it passes, then we move directly to the question that we've been discussing, and we don't have any more discussion, we just vote on it. If it fails, strangely enough, then we would keep on discussing the matter that we were discussing. But if Walter gets up and Walter says, I'm talking about Article 2, and I'm totally against Article 2, and I don't think Article 2 is a good idea, and I think that, everybody is full good on Article 2, and now, Mr. Moderator, I would like to move the question on Article 2. And the moderator goes, no, I'm sorry, but you can't speak to a question and then move it. You must rise and be recognized for the sole purpose of moving the question in order for your motion to move the question to be valid. And now you may think this is minor. Okay, you may think, that's never going to come up. That has won more arguments on the floor of town meeting than anything else. Knowing when to move the question, knowing how to do it, knowing how to make the motion is probably responsible for more political victories on the floor of town meeting than any other motion. So don't scoff, because it really is important to know how to do it. And the moderator also has a point. Sometimes you're into a big discussion, it's a big issue on whatever, and after 7 people have spoken, somebody gets up and says, Mr. Moderator, I move the question. Now it's not debatable. And I have in the past said, I've looked out and there's 10 people in line to speak. The moderator has the authority to use his or her discretion and say, I'm sorry, your motion is proper, but I feel there's still more people out there willing to speak. I don't think we've discussed this enough, so I'm going to rule your motion out of order and I'm going to continue discussion. That does not make you a popular moderator, because people generally want to go home and they want to end it. But there are times when you have to do that, because, the people who come, if you get 700 people to a town meeting, they came to discuss mostly one article, and you're several speakers into it, and all of a sudden somebody stands up and wants to move the question, and they don't get to speak and they don't get to do it. How do you ever get these people to come back? How do you ever tell them that this is the true democracy, that this is the voice of where they're going to be heard, when you're doing just the opposite? People say that town meeting is where the seeds of democracy are planted, and it's where free speech is the greatest thing ever. And 95% of the rules at town meeting limit speech. But I digress. So the moderator can overrule that. The other motion that happens all the time that you may be confused about is a motion to reconsider. the main purpose of a motion to reconsider is that, we just had an article and we just voted it, we just discussed it, and now we passed it. And now, after we passed it, now all of a sudden or we defeated it, whatever. Now somebody comes up and goes, oh, wait a minute, I just got here and I have new information about this article that could make a difference. You thought we were only going to get $100,000 in state aid on this, but we're going to get $500,000 in state aid on this. So we need to reconsider this because we've got new information. And everybody goes, oh, well, yeah, that could make a big difference. So somebody moves to reconsider the article that's already been voted on. It could have been just voted on or it could have been voted on before, although I'll get to the just voted on part. But, so we, ideally, somebody goes, I move to reconsider Article 3, seconded, all those in favor, now we reconsider Article 3. When you vote to reconsider something, you now negate the vote that happened on it prior, and it's now open for discussion again, and you're going to re-vote on it. So now you get the new information, you have a discussion, you can bring up anything you want, and then when it's done, we vote on it, and it goes on. And then once it's reconsidered once and voted on the second time, that's it. You can't bring it up again, even if there is new information. It's now locked in, you're done. That's over. But that's not what reconsideration is used for. It's almost never what it's used for. What it's used for is just to lock the article in. If you've got a particular article that you hold very dear, and you come in and it's a lot of debate, and you get it passed. Now, it's Article 18, and there are 36 articles on the warrant. People don't want to stay till Article 36. They came for Article 18. As much as I tell them they should stay, they don't want to stay. So somebody stands up and says, I move we reconsider Article 18. Second. And they say, and I do so in hopes that it will lose. They don't want you to vote to reconsider it. They want you to decline to reconsider it, because that locks it in, and now nobody can do it. So if the vote is no, and that article is locked in, they can go home and be assured that nobody's going to bring up their article again and change it. Okay, so that's a big deal, and that's why they use reconsideration. So when I became moderator, I instituted a rule, just my own rule. And I said, I'm not going to accept a motion to reconsider until at least 3 articles after the article that you're seeking to reconsider in the warrant have been acted upon. The reason that I do that is because I want to keep the people in the seats for at least 3 more articles. It leaves open the possibility that somebody could come forward with new information. It prevents the just locking it in immediately after it happens. And if I gotta stay, they gotta stay. It's really, that's the whole purpose of trying to keep people there. So that's the rule that we use, and it's worked out well. I always warn people, and I warn them every time we have a town meeting, that if you just go home, and this has happened, okay, you have an article that you care very much about, and we debated back and forth, and boom, it's voted, and it's passed, and you're very happy, and it wins. And now you and 50 of your close friends get up and go home, secure in the knowledge that you've saved democracy and saved the world. 4 articles later, while you're sitting at home, one of the no people who stayed stands up and goes, oh, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to reconsider Article 18. And now, most of the Article 18 supporters have gone home, and all that's left in the hall are people who voted no on Article 18. And so they move it and second it, and it comes up for reconsideration. And now it's funny to watch, because you see in the audience all the cell phones. Hey, they're doing this, you gotta get back here, you gotta get back here. And so then somebody says, I move the question, and it's now like 10:30, and I'll probably accept that motion, because if I don't, they're gonna kill me. And we now vote on it, and the article that everybody went home happy that they passed is reconsidered, voted down, and it loses. And half of them pick up the newspaper the next morning and read that Article 18 lost. And they're going, wait a minute, I was there, it passed. Well, no, you didn't stick around, you didn't know the rules, you didn't pay attention. And so I warn people about that all the time, and it's just something that can happen. There are a lot of motions that require different votes, 2/3 votes. If you're trying to pay a bill incurred in a prior fiscal year, Okay, like, a bill, somebody just lost a bill, and now the fiscal year runs to June 30th, and then July 1st is the new one. So now in October, they suddenly find a bill that was incurred in May. You can't pay it. You can't pay it because you're in a different fiscal year, and that's the rules, that's the state rules. So in order to do it, you have to put an article on town meeting to pay a prior fiscal year bill. And if you're doing it in an annual town meeting, then you must achieve a 4/5 majority vote in order for it to pass. And if any of you think that I can figure out a 4/5 majority vote by raising hands and looking at the audience, no. So we have a bylaw that says if it's unanimous, I can declare it a 4/5 vote. If one person votes no, then I have to divide the house and take a counted vote, even though I could tell it was like 99-1. You still have to do that. At a special town meeting, it's a 9/10 majority vote. I'm not really sure why that extra tenth is so important, but apparently it is. Those are just a couple of the little details. One of the most powerful motions that gets used at town meeting is a motion to adjourn. That's a very popular motion, but it can be used strategically. If there's an article, and selectmen decide the order of articles on the warrant. That's a very important thing, okay? Because if you put the main article that everybody's there for, if you put it up front, then everyone's going to vote on that and probably go home. And at the end, you're going to have me and 3 close friends sitting there voting on very necessary but boring articles. If you put it at the end, everybody calls up and goes, "What the hell are you keeping me at the town meeting for? And, why couldn't you move that up? And I have to go to bed. And I have a job and all this stuff." So it's very difficult for selectmen, but they set the warrant, the end of the warrant. If you have a big article at the end of the warrant, and people have been watching all night to jockey and see how's it going to go. Do I have enough yes people? Do I have enough no people? How's this going to happen? In the meantime, people are getting bored and they want to go home. A motion to adjourn, to just end the town meeting, is non-debatable. Okay? It's different from a motion to adjourn to a specific time and place. Like if I wanted to say, it's Wednesday night, if I wanted to say, if somebody says, "I move we adjourn this town meeting to next Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the Yale School," that's debatable. That we can have a debate about, we can talk about, and then we'll talk. But if somebody just stands up and gets recognized and says, "I move that the town meeting be adjourned," and it gets seconded, if that motion passes, everything that's left on that town meeting dies. Okay? Nothing gets carried over. It doesn't do anything. It's just dead. So if you don't want to look like you're really being, you're really saying no, but you want to kill it, people have been known to suddenly stand up and go, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I move we adjourn." And you should see the eyes light up. I can go home. Oh my God, I can go home. And then people are going, "Hey, wait a minute, we haven't voted on this." And the moderator goes, "Look, I'm sorry, but the motion is not debatable." Okay? And they're like, "Oh my God." And now the moderator goes, "All right, we have a motion to adjourn." And the moderator, a good moderator will say, "I will tell you that if you do adjourn this, that all articles on this warrant will be dead. It will be like they were defeated. It's over." And people vote. And if they vote yes on the motion, we go home, and that article, the people who wanted to defeat that article, they defeated it without ever having a vote on it. It's a smart move, or it's a sleazy move, depending on your point of view. But that's part of the art of town meeting. That's part of knowing the rules. That's the advantage that people who know the rules and know the procedures have when they go to town meeting. That's why it's important to know, some of these things. I could tell you more, but I mean, my God, how much you got? I'd rather just spend whatever time we have left. First of all, thanking you all for coming, because this is really important stuff. But as you can tell, I'm really involved in it. This is important to me. And it's important to me because I've seen what happens. And it's important to you when all of a sudden your kids are in school and there's an issue. or it's important when your house gets broken into, or it's important when something is moving into your neighborhood. All those things are important. Your local government is very, very important. And your local government, like everything else, needs to change and grow. And it generally doesn't, because the young people and the people who haven't been here for 20, 30, 40 years ignore it. And thank God that there are people like Brad and Joan and people who have been town officials for years when nobody else wanted to. Because without them, you'd really be in a big mess. So everybody should be grateful to the people who have stepped up. But a point that I just want to make is that in the override election that we just had, this past year, there were about 2,000 people who voted yes and about 2,200 people who voted no. That's 4,200 people, okay? So the yeses got, the yeses got 2,000, the noes got 2,200. We have 5 selectmen. Mr. Kimball, who's our veteran selectman, the last time he ran for office, he won by getting 1,383 votes. Mr. Salvo, in that same election, won with 1,139 votes. Mrs. Steele, who's one of our selectmen, the last time she ran, she won by getting 250 votes. Mr. Bramwell and Mr. Giblin, the last time they ran, they won overwhelmingly. They each got 162 votes. Okay, so we're electing selectmen. Okay, we're electing selectmen with 162 votes. That's not because Bob Kimball is more popular than Brad Bramwell. It's because there were issues on that ballot that brought people out that weren't there when Brad was there. So, my point is we're electing people with 162 votes. And these are the people who are making the decisions, like whether to put overrides on the ballot, like voting on your town policies, like voting on your bylaws, like voting on all your things. And then when we have a big issue like an override or something, now all of a sudden one side's getting 2,000, one side's getting 2,200. Where were you people? We could cut off some of those problems. We wouldn't be at the crisis stage if more people were getting involved along the way. Because, ladies and gentlemen, your problems are not solved or made at town meeting. Your problems are solved or made at the level where the town manager is creating the budget, where the FinCom is reviewing it, where all those things are happening. That's where a difference is made. If you wait till town meeting, you're already too late. Nothing changes at town meeting. Virtually nothing. Okay? You've got to get involved in the process. You've got to elect people who know what they're doing, and we've got some really good elected officials. We've managed to do really, really well. But they would be much happier if they won with 2,000 votes than 162. Brad got 162 votes. I bet you that was 80% of the vote. And so we've got to get more involved. We've got to come out. We've got to make a difference. Picking your town leaders matters. It matters a lot. And those are the kind of things that we have to get better at. So know your stuff. If you have any questions, I have an email. You can use my column email. You can call me. I'll always answer. I'm the town moderator. Hopefully, God willing and elections willing, will be a town moderator for at least a little while longer. And I want to make town meeting better. I want to get people more involved. And the only way I can do it is to talk to people like I'm talking to you and hope that it works out. So, the rest of our time we can answer any questions that you might have. Peter, I saw you. Did you have your hand up, or I just didn't?
No.
Okay. Yes.
So, I don't want to get into the details, but I just want to understand, when the override was put up, the understanding was you could go absentee. If you voted absentee, there was going to be that second election that wasn't allowed to be absentee, and you had to go there. And then you talked a lot about you have to wait till 10, 11 o'clock at night because your issue could get brought back up. How come it was voted down the first time, we didn't get to re-bring it back up, but if we had passed it the first time, it would, you know what I'm trying to say? It could be, we would have had to defend it again.
Yeah, that's because Specifically to overrides, overrides are a two-step process. No override can pass without two separate approvals. And they can be done in either order. We meaning the town, chose this time to go to the ballot first. And then if the ballot had passed, we would have gone to town meeting. In prior override attempts, it's been the opposite. We've gone to town meeting first and then gone to the ballot. But you need to do both. And the reason why things are different is at the ballot, when you're just voting on a referendum, it's just like voting for selectman or president or anything else. It's just an election. And the question is, do you want to spend this money in this way and all this? And so you go and you vote. And that's all you do. That's it. If it passes, then think of it this way. All you've done now is you have said, okay, I put this money into my checking account. I now have, whatever it was, $25 million into my checking account. But I haven't written the check yet. Okay, all I did was I now have this money available, and I wouldn't have had it available unless the election voted. Now we have to go to town meeting. And now town meeting decides whether to write the check or not. Okay? So the vote on the first vote is simply to allow excess room on your levy limit. It's permission to raise your levy limit by whatever amount you're asking. But raising your levy limit does not mean you're spending. It only gives you the capability to spend. Now you've got to go to town meeting, and town meeting can say, yes, I'll write the check for that, or no, you know what, I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm not going to touch it. And at town meeting, there's no absentee ballot. At town meeting, that's a legislative body. You have to go and deliberate and vote. I get asked all the time, why can't I vote by absentee ballot at town meeting? There are people who firmly believe that they should be able to sit at home in front of their television, listen to the debate, and then go online and vote yes or no. And aside from the security nightmare that I can see that being how you would know, it defeats the whole purpose of town meeting. If you're going to do something like that, then get rid of it and just poll people or do whatever. But overrides are two separate processes. The ballot just allows for town meeting. Town meeting is the one that actually spends. One, you can vote absentee because it's just an election. One, you must be there and you must be in person and you must vote and you must vote. I can't tell you how many people not this past override, but the override attempt before, were mad at me because we had a town meeting at Rand and trying to take a vote, and that was a meeting where we had 2,500 people coming in. I delayed the meeting for over an hour just because there were people coming in and we couldn't register them fast enough. And I didn't want to start a meeting without people. And people were standing outside, and I was calling a meeting. I'd be skewed, So I hope that answers your question, but that's the answer. Some people would disagree with you. And you can change it. And in the past, we have done it. In the past, we had a town meeting. We had like 1,500, 2,000 people show up. It was a nightmare. I have dreams about it. And they showed up, and it passed. It passed overwhelmingly. All right? And then we went to the ballot, and it got crushed. I mean, it lost like 3-1. And now you're sitting there saying, why did I spend about $6,000 to hold this meeting when I should have waited to see what the election was going to do, and then I would have known if I had to spend the money on holding the meeting. In Easton, just this year, they did it the other way around. They held their town meeting first, and they overwhelmingly approved the override at town meeting. It took forever. They had a huge crowd, but they overwhelmingly approved it. Then it went on the ballot. It got crushed.
Right. No, I meant the fact that you can't bring it up a second time versus I agree with you. I would rather do the absentee vote, see where it gets you, than spend all that time and money if it wasn't.
Did she say absentee?
Yeah, she means that, yeah. The question was, a lot of people think you can vote absentee at town meeting.
You can't.
And you can't.
No, it makes sense, but an absentee is a convenience. For me, it's a convenience.
Sure.
I have young children, so if we had gone to the town meeting, one of two people who voted yes, one would have had to stay home with the children.
Yes, and that brings you to the point where there are two basic schools of thought. The most common school of thought is, hey, listen, I don't want to hear about your problem with your kids and your this and that. This is town meeting. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked, and this is how you have to do it. And I don't care if the world has changed and you have, everything else. This is how you have to do it. The other school of thought is people say, well, maybe the government should change. Maybe it's not realistic to expect people to come out to to meetings the way they did in the 18th century and do all this. And there's validity to both sides. There's perfect validity to both sides. It all depends on what the town wants to do. I will tell you that Norton in 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, we had a government study committee that I was on it, and we discussed whether or not we should change the form of government. And we spent literally 2 years. We studied every form of government, and we made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and we unanimously said that Norton should give up annual town meeting and go to a town council form of government with a strong town manager. And the Board of Selectmen formed the committee. They were the ones who put it up. And so we did all this, and we brought it in, and the Board of Selectmen said, crap, what do we do with this now? And they said, so without telling us or telling anybody, they put it on a ballot, on a non-binding referendum question, figuring that it would lose, it would go away, and then it could never be heard from again, and they wouldn't have to deal with it. Because it eliminated the Board of Selectmen, too. It eliminated town meeting. And it passed. The townspeople said, yeah, we think we should go further and investigate this and do this. And then the Board of Selectmen said, and there might be one member on the board who's still on the board. This is a different Board of Selectmen. But the Board of Selectmen at the time said, oh crap, now what do we do? And so they just ignored it until it went away. And
Because it was non-binding?
yes, because it was non-binding. So we had a committee that unanimously recommended it. We had a non-binding vote to go ahead and pursue it, and nobody's ever done anything about it. And town meeting is a great system if that's what you're used to. And I grew up with it. I wouldn't have been involved in town government if it wasn't for town meeting. I don't want to get here. We're getting close, but I can feel the shock waves going through my seat. But I got appointed to the finance committee when I was 18 years old. I was still in high school, and we did it because because we had a mock town meeting in our school, and the moderator came to our school, and we took the issues of the day. We had a mock town meeting. I played the role of chairman of the finance committee, and we had the moderator come in and run the meeting, and it was great. We had the whole school. We had the auditorium. We did all this, and afterwards the next day, Mr. Yell, the moderator, came to school. The voting age had just changed to 18, and they called me down to the office. I thought I was in trouble, and they said, Mr. Yell is here, and he wants to know if you'd consider being appointed to the finance committee. And I tell the same joke all the time. I said, I'm probably the first finance committee appointee who ever said, I need to go ask my mother. But and I got appointed. I spent 7 years on it, and then later on I spent another 8 years on it. And it was because it was brought to me. It was because people reached out, and it's a great system, but boy, can it be bumpy. Yes.
So, I'm just curious where you're saying switch to a council form of government. The more I learn about this, I think the town meeting is very interesting, and I like it the more I learn about it, but it's super inconvenient. If we were ever to actually push and move to this council, how do the town people then have their voices heard? Do you elect people, like you research where they stand on issues and you elect them, and for a certain amount of time they make all these choices, they would pass an override without the town people having any say in that? How would that then work?
If you had a town council, and the nearest form of town councils in this area are probably Franklin, and then I think Barnstable are the near, and I think West Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, one of the Bridgewaters, just changed a year or two ago to the same system. The way it works is, right now you have the executive, the legislative. It would eliminate town meeting, it would eliminate the Board of Selectmen. You'd have pick an odd number, 7, 11, 13, however many councilors you would have. They would be elected probably both by precinct and at large. And they would take the place of the selectmen and the town meeting. So now if, the budget would be approved by your town council, okay, and they would be elected to staggered terms and all that stuff. If you don't like what they're doing, you would vote against them when the time came. They would take the place of town meeting, so they would vote on the budget, they would vote on the bylaws, they would vote on all these things. They would give the licenses the way the selectmen do now. And if you wanted to have, instead of going to a town meeting and raising your hand and standing up and arguing for your cause, whatever, you would call your counselor, or you would call 3 counselors or 5 counselors, and you would try to convince them of the strength of your argument and go to the meetings. The meetings would be open, they would do all these things. It's definitely a less pure democratic form of government. There's no question about that. The obvious difference is that it's, number one, it's what most of the rest of the country does. But number two, it creates more of a convenience. In the world today, there are a lot of people who question whether it's practical to tell people they have to come to a gym on a Monday night to vote on a $28 million or $50 million budget.
So if the town finds that it's in a shortfall financially and they need to tax the people in the town to make up that difference,
The way an override,
or they just raise taxes?
the way an override would work with the town council is you would still need the ballot vote of the townspeople, just like you do now. It would still have to be put before a ballot, and all the townspeople would have to vote on it. The difference is that the second part, or the first part, depending on which order you do it, instead of going to town meeting, it has to go to the town council. And the town council would have to vote, a majority of the town council would have to vote to pass it. That would be, the town council voting to pass it would be the same as town meeting voting to pass it.
So the people would do the step of putting it out there, like putting it on the paper or whatever, to appropriate or to put the funds there, but only the council would then appropriate the money
It would be
to the school.
It would be exactly the same as you have now, except instead of town meeting voting to approve it, town council would vote to approve
13
it.
plus instead of 4,000.
So,
Yeah, basically,
yeah.
but what if you have a council of people that tell you one thing and then they're
Hopefully it'd be a
elected
good
and
mix,
they-
but you never know.
That's why you would have elections, and that's
You're
why,
elected, so your process, your voice, right, we go through the election of those councilors.
Right.
there's no perfect system. There's no system that's going to solve all the problems, and we can argue till the cows come home about which one is better, and everybody has their opinion, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I respect all those different opinions. I just come down on the side of, if you continue to use a legislative system where 95% of your legislators never show up, then the problem just might be the system. Just might be the system. Yes?
Question. Okay, I'm from a city. I've been here for 8 years, so I'm not used to this whole town council thing, town meeting thing. And I don't know when it comes time to elections anything about the people I'm supposed to be voting for. So how do I find out that information?
That's a really great question. Couple of things. Number one, I read a newspaper column, so I always tell people they should read the local newspaper. But you also have a great asset in your local cable, assuming you have cable. Some people don't, especially nowadays. My son just cut the cord and doesn't have cable. I can't even walk into his house. It just gives me the chills. But we have cable access, and it's an on-demand thing, so you can watch meetings. There are usually, in years when there are contests, there are usually debates that are sponsored and held. Not always, but generally. You have to make an outward effort. It doesn't really come to you. I will tell you that for most of the people involved in town government now, they're not overly concerned with reaching out. They're pretty comfortable where they are. Okay? And I know, because I was one of them. Okay? So, this is their system. And it's not like they want to keep it just themselves. They think it's the best system. And they want to keep it. So, that doesn't mean that officials don't reach out, because I've seen selectmen and the school committee and all kinds of people try to reach out. But a lot of the times when we reach out in the wrong way. We just, again, it's like making all this information available, and then suddenly the light bulb's going to go on in everybody's head. No, it's not.
You know, Bill, I've heard you say that twice, but I think there's evidence against that point. And
Okay.
I think it's perfect to bring up the Norton Facebook page. I mean, there's a great point about whether you're for or against, the information is pushed to you, right? You sign up for that, and this is the whole statement, but I agree with you, right? Too many political systems right now are all about pulling information. I think one of the biggest successes everybody who was involved should take credit for is you guys pushed information out. You got 4,000 people to show up. How do we put that to use? Because changing a political system, I agree, there's all sorts of shenanigans, it's a process, but you know, pushing information, again, I'm not saying pro or con, but pushing information is a great way of getting people more informed, because you're going to elicit both reactions.
Yep. I think that, and this is the chicken or the egg, you know, theory. I think the biggest reason that I hear that people don't get involved is because they don't understand and they don't feel they can make a difference. And the reason that they don't understand and don't make a difference is because they don't get involved. So it's that, you know, that vicious cycle. What it usually takes is some cataclysmic event, an override, building a school, you know, a debt exclusion for building a town hall, some kind of political thing. Back when we used to get 500-600 people at a town meeting, Brad and Joan again will remember, it was because at that time in the 70s, the 80s, Norton was the joke of the area in terms of politics. Our politics were so nasty and so bad. You have no idea when I tell you how bad. I mean, people look at me now, you know, they look at me with that old, it's like that crazy uncle in the attic they let out of holidays and stuff. But I'm telling you, it was bad. Wow. And it's because we didn't have a town meeting, we didn't have a town manager, everybody was in it, you know, and all these different factions. There was no way to get out information. But people saw that, and they got involved because they were scared. They got involved because they thought that they were losing control. And frankly, people don't get involved because they're not pissed off enough. Okay? And so my theory is we need to piss more people off. I'm pretty good at that, generally speaking, but it's the truth. Okay? And it's sad. I wish I could say we just need devotion and we need action, but nothing fuels political involvement more than anger. Nothing. And now it's a matter of controlling anger. If anger gets out of control, look at the national election. That's anger out of control, and that's ugly, and that's horrible, and it's you know, everything. But if you can channel, if you can get people who are angry and willing to do something, you know, whether you agreed with the override or didn't agree with the override, the thing that was encouraging to me was on both sides. I saw people come together to try to join their issue, whether they were working against it or whether they were working for it. And some of it was ugly, but most of it was pretty good. Most of it was information-based. Most of it was trying to work together. You know, but it all stemmed from anger. The school side was angry because the budget was going to get cut, their kids' education was going to be affected, they weren't going to do everything they want. The quote-unquote other side was angry because their taxes were going to go up, they had just done a debt exclusion on a new school, there was, you know, all kinds of things. So make no mistake, it wasn't nobility that turned out 4,000 people. It was anger. And there's no way around that, but you have to make it constructive.
So I won't disagree, I agree with you, but I think there's the intermediate point I'm trying to raise is the awareness that Facebook page generated is what drove the anger and drove the volume of people that were in the debate. Yes. And I think that's healthy, right? That's democracy. Yes,
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think all the access that we have now is great. Facebook pages, web pages, emails back and forth. The way the town has reached out and tried to do this, I think it's all great. I'm totally in favor of it. I'm just telling you that, you know, our problem is not that people don't have access to information. Our problem is that they don't want the access to the information. That's our biggest problem, and we need to want. And it's human nature. We all react to crises. I mean, look at charities. We'll give to charities, and it'll be a certain level, and everything will be great. Then you have a disaster, and our giving to charities quadruples in no time because there's a need, and we're upset, and we're emotional, and we do that. That's just human nature. Well, local government politics really isn't much different. If everything's going along, and Norton, for the last 20 years or so, Norton, I really believe, has been a victim of its own success. We were so bad for so many years, and now we've gotten to the point where things have gone along pretty good. It's been pretty good. There's no real great infighting. The politics aren't anywhere near what they were. Taxes have been okay. We've only tried, other than the debt exclusion, we've tried one override in maybe the last 10, 12 years. Norton has never had an operational override. It's 1983, so it's 35 years? Something like that we've never exceeded the limits of Proposition 2.5 for general spending purposes? That's a hell of an achievement.
When everybody else around us hasn't.
Yeah, and most other towns have done it. But what's our reward? Do people go, hey, town government, nice job. You've stayed there and you've done it and you've really held the line and you've been great. No, everybody thinks they've been taxed to death. And I don't blame them because their tax bill keeps going up. And how do you explain to them that the tax bill kept going up, but the town wasn't really, spending a lot of it? People don't understand that. And
See,
it's really difficult.
this is a great point, right? That's how we use that channel to change minds. Is because that's a really important fact that I had no idea about until I started to get involved with the Facebook page.
Exactly.
Because that was a big one for me too.
Yeah, you said the information is there, but I don't have time to go find it. But
Right.
there's not obsessing about Facebook these days or something. Like it's there, it's right there.
Yep.
I wouldn't know what the foggiest place to go find it.
I think there's a huge lack of communication from our town government to its residents. I think that's the biggest problem. There's a lack of communication, so the information may be available, but they don't communicate it to any of us. And then, especially like some of the people who are more the computer age, like we're more comfortable with Facebook, maybe some of us, than picking up the phone or going to the library or whatever it may be. And so maybe we can try to find a way to broaden that communication to the residents. I mean, we're a young town, basically, with a very old government structure, which is okay.
Perfect.
But it just would help to convey and communicate when elections are happening, who these candidates are, when the budget is going to be discussed, when the budget is going to be decided. Cable's great. I think that's even being phased out. I don't know what the relationship is with the Norton Cable News Network, but is there an option to podcast the meetings that we can listen to on our iPods or our iPhones on the way to work while we take a walk, that we don't have to be sitting in front of a television? Because quite frankly, not lots of people like to sit in front of the television anymore or in a meeting.
Or they can check out when I do the town hall and I write down the notes of what went on the meeting, so I type it at home and people can see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Absolutely, Peter does a great job, and it's really, you're absolutely right, Guy. You couldn't be more right. And I know. Look, I'm 60 years old. I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, and I'm just realizing how set in my ways I am. And as I talk to other people, younger people, which is just virtually everybody these days, it's like I realize I'm not speaking the same language. And it's not my fault, and it's not their fault. It's just I'm telling them all about town meeting. They're looking at me going, what are you talking about? What's town meeting? And I forget that I need to explain that.
And the thing is, like, I know you're joking when you say it's boring, because I know you don't really think so, but we don't all necessarily think it's boring either. Like, we may actually be very interested.
Yep.
And so, like, I just feel like if there's a way that we can, like, channel that from our government? I mean, I don't know how to do that.
Well,
But
I think one of the things is we can tell Jay who's taking my meeting here, and I'll talk to Jason Benjamin. I don't know. That's a good point about the podcast thing. And I bet you Jason Benjamin, who's the director of Norton Community Television, which, by the way, your cable access is a quasi-town board. I mean, it's funded through your cable bill, through Comcast, but the town appoints members to the. Yeah, I used to be the chairman of it, so I'm aware of these things, and they would probably like to know that. That's one of the good things that would come up, because I guarantee you they have some money. And maybe they can put that on podcast. That's a great idea that I never thought of, and
I think there's a lot of us interested, and I think we're sick of being a day late and a dollar short.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, you need to drag those of us who don't even realize that we're pulling it down along with you. We keep thinking that you're the problem. You keep thinking that we're the problem, and in the meantime, we're really not focusing on what really is the problem, which is that we have problems, and that we've got to find a good way to solve them. Too often we get bogged down into the townie versus the newcomer, kind of thing. I'm a townie. If you've lived here for less than 30 years, you're a newcomer. It's about the 30-year break when we start considering you a townie. And we've spent a lot of time doing that. We have to get over that. A lot of people think that Norton is still the town I grew up in. I would love to think that, but Norton's not the town I grew up in.
No, it's not the town I grew up in.
No, it's changed a whole lot, and we have to understand that. And look at all the changes. Look at all the changes around, and then look at our government. How much has our government changed in contrast to how everything around it has changed? And, I'm not saying that's the whole problem. It's not. But it's a good chunk, and we need to work together. We need to talk. We need to understand the needs that everybody has, and that's why you guys are so important. And look, there's not just young people. There's not just more experienced people. This is a great mix. It's not a huge number, but it's a great mix, and everybody's respectful. Everybody's willing to talk. Everybody's willing to. That's what we need. And, the first one we did these, we had maybe 15 or 20 people. Now, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40 people, however many are here. That's how it starts. That's how it's that old saying, don't tell me that a small group of people can't change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. And that's where we're at. We're not all going to agree. We're not all going to walk around here tonight and go, well, we solved everything. We solved all the problems, and we discussed it all. But at least we talked. At least we know. And our town government has to be a living, breathing, changing thing. We can't expect people just to adapt to it. We have to adapt town government to the people too. And if we can start making people understand that and start doing that, that's a big step. It doesn't mean we have to change everything. It just means we have to at least talk about it. I can feel the voltage going through my chair. Anybody else have anything before we, Brett?
I just wanted to mention, I know people want communication, and I'm the worst one here when it comes to electronics. I pass it to my grandson to take care of anything electronic, but just to remind you is that the best place to get information about the budget and everything like that is the Finance Committee. Starting probably in March, they meet every Monday and Wednesday nights. And if you can't watch it live, cable will, cycle it. Yeah. But it is there. And Bill mentioned that the Board of Selectmen appoint a lot of people to committees. The Board of Selectmen is always looking for people who are interested in serving the town in a variety of positions. And to the point where even if we have full boards, we're interested in putting alternates on just to get people involved. So anybody who's interested in any subject, whether it's recreation, conservation, any subject, we're more than happy to have people come and get involved. And I know myself, Bill has me on longevity, but
You're old.
I've only been around for about 25 years serving the government, but I don't foresee myself staying around too much longer, because I believe in term limits, and I'm just about done. So we're going to need other people to get involved, but you have to start grassroots, and the best way to really get a well-rounded education is to watch the finance. It's mostly the things go through town meeting because it's such a well-respected board, and a lot of that goes to the people that the moderators over the years have appointed. So I just want to make sure that people know that if you want to serve in an area that's interesting to you, just call the selectman's office. I'm sure we have a list of openings on numerous committees.
And while Brad's saying that, the finance committee, I think, is one of the key spots. And there are people in this room who I have lobbied very many times to try to be on the finance committee. But I have a vacancy right now that just came up. And vacancies don't occur very often on the finance committee. I have one now. And the person who I now have 10 members on the 11 committee, all 10 are men. And I have appointed 3, 4, 5 women over the last 8, 9 years, and most of them have been smart enough to escape at some point in time and go on. I would love to have the ability to appoint a woman to the finance committee. And I know that sounds sexist, and everyone says, don't you want the best candidate? Well, yeah, I do. But I'm supposed to balance with demographics too. And if you have your finance committee that has 11 men, I don't consider that to be really balanced. So you don't have to be a financial expert. All you have to do is be willing to learn. All you have to do is have an open mind. You don't have to have experience. You don't have to have anything. You just need to be willing to. They meet anywhere from 1 to 2 nights a week for a concentrated period, from like maybe 1 night a week from March to through April, and then maybe once or twice a week in May as they get close to town meeting, and then it happens again for like a month in September when they get down to the other meeting. So I'm not telling you it's not a lot of work. It is some work, but boy, it's a place where you learn. It's a place where you make a difference. It's a place where you help your community. And if anybody wants to talk to me about it, anybody wants to know more about it, I'm going to be making an appointment sometime in the next few weeks, and I would love to be able to talk to anybody, man or woman, who is interested in being on that committee. And by the way, Jay was telling me that I think Jason, our director, is probably watching on cable and wants to know that you can go to nortonmediacenter.org at any time and find all these meetings. So even on your phone, sometimes you can go to them and listen to them as you go along. So anyway, thank you all. Yes, sir.
First off, I agree with you wholeheartedly, which I very seldom do. But to have a woman on the finance committee, I think it's disrespectful almost to not to have one of these women on the finance committee. However, every time I look at the finance committee, I want to throw rocks at my TV. I don't because it's my TV. But it's 70% of this town's budget plus the special extras that they get go to the school. The rest go to the town. This is, it's not right. And it should be not basically changed, but have somebody on the finance committee to put their finger on them and say, you can't do this. You can't do this. It never happens.
No, and I understand what you're saying, and I will tell you that basically pretty much in every town around, the schools account for about 70% of the town's budget. And the reason that it does that is because of the way the state is set up, and the way it funds everything, and the way it forces you to do this. It's like, you know, town officials get so discouraged because they have so little say in it, you know?
I understand that, but it's when it's, well, a lot of our speakers are saying, well, why did they spend that all? Because I would have done that when I was a teacher.
I understand your frustration, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm glad I don't have to be on the finance committee anymore. I'm more than happy to join Brad soon in you know, hoping that we can leave it all to, you know, some of you younger folks who are, you know, like you, who are who are going to step up and hopefully take over.
Will, my Judy.
All right, thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming.